Have you ever noticed that no matter how many people you meet, no matter how many relationships you have, there's always a distance, a feeling that something isn't being said, that something isn't being seen, that despite all the physical closeness, you're still fundamentally alone. And you try. God knows you try. You open up, you share, you make yourself vulnerable. But even so, even doing everything right, there's this gap, this emptiness between you and the other that no amount of words, no amount of time together can completely fill. And so you start to think, maybe it's the other person. Maybe they're not really seeing me. Maybe they're not deep enough. Maybe I need to find someone more conscious, more awake, more right. And you search, you change relationships, you meet new people, and the story repeats. The same distance, the same emptiness, the same feeling of not being completely known. But what if it's not about the other person? What if it never was? What if the depth you find in another is just a direct reflection of the depth you found in yourself? If you're awake at 3 a.m. feeling alone, even next to someone, even surrounded by people, this video is for you. Because maybe the problem isn't that you haven't found the right person. Maybe it's that you haven't found yourself yet. Let's talk about relationships, but not in the way you expect. Intro. There's a truth about relationships that nobody wants to hear. A truth that goes against everything we've been taught about love, connection, and intimacy. And it's this: you cannot know another person more deeply than you know yourself. It doesn't matter how open the other person is. It doesn't matter how vulnerable they're willing to be. It doesn't matter how much time you spend together. If you haven't dived into your own depths, if you haven't explored the dark corners of your own consciousness, if you haven't met yourself in the darkness of absolute solitude, you simply don't have the capacity to see the other completely. Because seeing the other requires tools, requires perception, requires a way of looking that only develops through self-encounter. And I know this sounds harsh. I know it seems like I'm placing blame on you for the emptiness you feel in your relationships, but it's not about blame. It was never about blame. It's about understanding that relationships are mirrors, perfect mirrors. They reflect back exactly the level of consciousness, the level of depth, the level of honesty you brought to the encounter. If you relate from the surface, from the mask, from the persona you built to navigate the world, you'll meet the other's mask. And you'll both dance this superficial dance, this dance of roles and expectations, and wonder why you feel so empty. But if you relate from depth, from the place in you that has no name, that has no form, that isn't trying to impress or please or protect, you'll meet depth in the other. Or you'll realize very quickly that there's no depth there, and both are gifts. Because most people live their entire lives without ever really knowing themselves. They know their tastes, their preferences, their stories, but they never sat in the silence of their own company and asked, "Who am I?" when I'm not trying to be anyone. They never dove below the narrative, below the biography, below all the stories they tell about themselves and found that presence, that consciousness, that vast space that doesn't need validation, approval, external love to exist. And because they haven't met themselves, they can't meet you. Not really. They can meet the version of you that you present, but the truth of you, the essence of you, remains invisible. If this is touching something in you, if you've ever felt this deep loneliness, even surrounded by people, leave a comment. Just one word: mirror. Because recognizing that relationships are mirrors is the first step to finally being seen and to finally seeing. So how do you find depth in others? You don't find it. You become deep, and then depth finds you. Let's explore how this works. Every person you meet is a mirror. Not metaphorically, literally. They reflect back to you exactly what you're bringing to the encounter. Not what you think you're bringing, not what you hope you're bringing, but what you really are in that moment. If you're relating from fear, you'll meet fear in the other. Maybe not the same fear, maybe not expressed the same way, but fear in some form will be there, because fear recognizes fear. If you're relating from need, from an emptiness you hope the other will fill, you'll attract people who also have voids, and you'll both try to use each other as filling. And it will work for a while, until the voids prove to be too deep, too insatiable. If you're relating from ego, from the need to be right, to be superior, to prove your worth, you'll meet ego in the other. And you'll compete, you'll compare, you'll measure each other against impossible standards. But if you relate from presence, from a place in you that's already complete, that doesn't need anything from the other to validate your existence, you'll meet presence, or you'll clearly see the absence of it. And both are valuable, because relationships don't exist to complete you. Relationships exist to show you where you're still not complete, to show you the parts of you that are still hidden, repressed, unexamined. That's why relationships are so difficult. That's why they bring so much pain, because they reveal, they expose. They take everything you buried, everything you ignored, everything you pretended didn't exist, and put it right in front of you. And then you have a choice. You can blame the other. You can say, they make me feel this way. They hurt me. They don't understand me. Or you can look deeper. You can ask, why does this hurt me? Why does this trigger me? What is this revealing about me that I don't want to see? And this doesn't mean the other has no responsibility. This doesn't mean every conflict is your fault. But it means your job isn't to fix the other. Your job isn't to make the other see you. Your job is to become so clear, so present, so deeply anchored in who you are, that whatever mirror you encounter reflects clarity. Because here's the truth. You can't control who the other is. You can't force them to be more conscious, deeper, more awake. But you can go deeper yourself. You can wake up yourself. And when you do that, when you really do that, something changes in your relationships. Either the people around you start going deeper too, because presence invites presence, or they move away because they're not ready, because depth scares them, because it's easier to stay on the surface, and both are okay.
Because you're not here to save anyone. You're here to meet yourself. And when you meet yourself, when you really meet yourself, you realize you were never alone. Not because there's someone out there who finally understands you, but because you understood yourself. And in that understanding, in that deep clarity about who you are, loneliness dissolves. Not because it disappears, but because you realize it was never loneliness. It was just longing for yourself. Have you noticed that most of your relationships happen at the level of stories, at the level of biographies? I am this, you are that. I like this, you like that. I come from here, you come from there. And you exchange information, exchange experiences, exchange opinions, and call it intimacy. Call it knowing each other. But do you really know someone when you know their story? Do you really see someone when you only see the events of their life? No, because the story isn't the person. The biography isn't the being. Someone's life events are just the surface. They're the waves on the ocean. And you can spend years studying waves, cataloging waves, describing waves, and never, not once, touch the ocean. The real meeting, the deep meeting, doesn't happen at the level of story. It happens at the level of presence, at the level of being, at the level where there's no longer I and you as separate entities with different biographies, but just consciousness. Consciousness meeting consciousness.
And this meeting, this real meeting, is rare, incredibly rare, because it requires both people to leave their stories at the door. Requires both to stop performing, explaining, justifying. Requires both to simply be. And most people don't know how to do this. Most people are so identified with their story, so attached to their narrative, that when you ask them to leave it, they panic. But who am I without my story? Who am I without my achievements, without my traumas, without my struggles? And the answer is, you are everything. You are the space within which all stories appear. You are the consciousness that witnesses all biographies. You are the ocean, not the wave. But the mind doesn't like this. The mind wants form, wants definition, wants to be able to say, I am this, you are that, and so we know how to relate. And so you relate to the other's story, not to the other's being, and the other relates to your story, not to your being. And you both dance this dance of narratives, of expectations based on biographies, of projections based on the past, and call it a relationship. But a real relationship, a real meeting, can only happen when two people stop hiding behind their stories, when two people sit together in silence and allow whatever is present to be present, without trying to fix it, without trying to change it, without trying to make it more comfortable, more acceptable, more aligned with the narrative. Just presence, pure, naked, unadorned. And in that presence, in that shared silence, something happens. Something that words can't describe, something that biographies can't capture. You see the other, really see. Not their story, not the roles they play, not the masks they wear, but the essence, the consciousness, the being. And the other sees you,
really sees you. And in that mutual seeing, in that deep recognition, loneliness disappears. Not because you found someone who understands you, but because you realized there were never two. It was always one. One seeing itself through two different forms. One recognizing itself in two different mirrors. But to get to this recognition, to get to this real meeting, you first have to meet yourself. You have to sit in the silence of your own company and let go of all your stories, all your defenses, all your attempts to be someone, and just be. Without form, without definition, without narrative. And in that being, in that pure presence with yourself, you begin to understand what's possible with the other. There's a special loneliness, a loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people and still not being seen. You know this loneliness. You felt it. You're in a relationship, maybe for years, and still you feel like the other person doesn't really know you. Like, despite all the closeness, all the shared history, all the physical intimacy, they're relating to a version of you, not to you. And you try. You try to express yourself in different ways. You try to be more vulnerable. You try to explain who you really are. But it seems like no matter what you say, no matter how much you open up, they don't see. And so you start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Am I so hard to understand? Am I so complicated, so deep, so different that no one will ever really know me? And the answer is no. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not too complicated. You're not too deep. You're not too different. What's happening is that you're relating with people who haven't met themselves. And because they haven't met themselves, they don't have the tools to see you. They don't have the perception, the clarity, the depth necessary to recognize what you really are. Because seeing another person deeply requires something specific. Requires that you've been in the depths, that you've dived into your own abyss, that you faced your own shadows, your own fears, your own voids. Because only when you've done that, only when you've really done that, can you recognize when the other is doing the same. You can see the pain behind the words. You can feel the fear behind the mask. You can perceive the presence behind the performance. But if you've never gone deep, if you've always stayed on the surface of your own life, depth in the other is invisible to you. It's like trying to explain color to someone born blind. The words don't make sense. The experience can't be shared. And that's why you feel so alone. Not because nobody sees you, but because you're surrounded by people who never learned to see, who never developed the eyes that see beyond the surface. And you have two choices. You can keep trying to make these people see you. You can twist yourself, explain yourself, simplify yourself, hoping they'll eventually understand. Or you can stop. Stop trying to be seen by people who don't have eyes to see. And instead, you can go even deeper. You can become so clear, so present, so unequivocally yourself that you naturally attract people who can see. Because here's the truth, deep people recognize deep people. Not through words, not through explanations, but through resonance. through a silent recognition that doesn't need language. And when that happens, when you meet someone who really sees you, it's not because you finally explained yourself well. It's not because you finally found the right words. It's because you both did the work. You both dived. You both met yourselves in the depths. And now when you look at each other, you don't just see the stories. You don't just see the masks. You see the essence, the consciousness, the being. And in that mutual seeing, in that deep recognition, loneliness dissolves, not because you complete each other, but because you remind each other of what you always were: whole, complete, never really alone. If you've ever felt this deep loneliness, if you've ever wondered if anyone really sees you, share this video. Not for me, but because there's someone in your life, maybe someone you love, who needs to hear this, who needs to know that the loneliness they feel isn't because there's something wrong with them. It's just an invitation to dive deeper. So how do you go deeper? How do you develop the eyes that see? Let's explore. The work of going deeper isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because it requires you to stop running. Stop distracting yourself. Stop filling every moment with noise, with activity, with company. And sit in the silence of your own presence. And at first, that silence is deafening. Because when you stop, when you really stop everything, you were avoiding rises to the surface. The doubts, the fears, the insecurities, the parts of you that you judged, rejected, buried, they all come. They all ask to be seen. And the temptation is to run again. Pick up the phone, call someone, find something, anything to fill the void. But the real work is to stay, to allow everything that's present to be present, without trying to fix it, without trying to change it, without trying to make it more acceptable. Just witness, just see, just be with. And as you do this, as you really do this, something extraordinary happens. The things you thought would destroy you, that would break you, that would prove you're not enough, they don't. They just pass, like clouds, like waves. And what remains, what was always there, is you. Not the version of you hiding behind masks, but the real you, the consciousness, the presence, the being. And when you touch that, when you really touch that, even just for a moment, something changes in you. You stop seeking external validation. You stop needing others to complete you. You stop relating from emptiness, and you begin to relate from fullness, from completeness, from a place that doesn't need anything but is open to everything. And when you relate from that place, when you really relate from that place, your relationships change completely. You stop attracting people who need you to feel whole. You stop attracting codependent dynamics, dramas, power games, and you begin to attract people who also did the work, who also dived, who also met themselves in the depths. And when two complete beings meet, when two presences recognize each other, it's not a relationship of need, it's not a relationship of filling voids, it's a relationship of celebration, of mutual recognition, of dance between two beings who don't need each other but choose to be together. And this doesn't mean there's no conflict. Doesn't mean everything is perpetual harmony, but it means conflict isn't about unmet needs. It's not about frustrated expectations. It's not about trying to make the other be who you need them to be. It's about two consciousnesses navigating the experience of being in human form. And sometimes forms collide. Sometimes personalities conflict. And that's okay, because underneath the conflict, there's recognition, there's respect, there's love that doesn't depend on agreement. But to get there, to have that kind of relationship, you first have to do the work alone. You have to meet yourself. You have to dive into your own depths and emerge with clarity about who you are. And then, and only then, can you meet the other deeply. Because you can only take the other as deep as you've gone yourself. There's a way of seeing relationships that transforms everything. And it's this. Relationships aren't about finding the right person. Relationships are a spiritual practice, a practice of seeing, of presence, of unconditional love. Because when you understand that every person is a mirror, when you really understand this, you stop blaming, you stop demanding, you stop expecting the other to be different from what they are. And you begin to use every encounter, every interaction, every conflict as an opportunity to go deeper, to see where you're still not clear, to notice where you're still relating from ego, from fear, from need. And this doesn't mean accepting abuse, doesn't mean staying in relationships that hurt you, doesn't mean allowing others to disrespect you under the guise of spiritual work. It means using every relationship as a teacher, as a revealer, as a path back to yourself. Because every relationship, absolutely every relationship, is showing you something. It's showing you where you're still not free, where you're still attached, where you're still identified with stories about how things should be. And when you see this, when you really see this, relationships stop being about the other. They become about you. Not in a selfish way, but in the sense that your job isn't to fix the other. Your job is to become so clear, so present, so free that you naturally elevate any relationship you enter. And sometimes you elevate the relationship, and the other goes deeper with you, and you grow together. And sometimes the relationship ends because the other isn't ready, because the other still needs dynamics you've already transcended. And both are okay, because you're no longer clinging to relationships out of fear of being alone. You're no longer using people to avoid meeting yourself. You're using relationships for what they really are: mirrors, teachers, portals to greater self-knowledge. And when you live like this, when you really live like this, something magical happens. You stop attracting relationships based on need. You stop repeating the same patterns. You stop feeling trapped, suffocated, misunderstood, and you begin to experience relationships based on freedom, on celebration, on mutual recognition of two consciousnesses that don't need each other but delight in being together. And in these relationships, in these rare and precious relationships, you finally experience what it is to be seen, really seen. Not the version of you that you present, not the persona, not the mask, but the essence. And when you're seen like this, when you're really seen like this, You realize you were never alone, not because there's someone out there who completes you, but because being seen and seeing this way reminds you of the fundamental truth. You were always complete. You were always whole. And every relationship, every encounter, every connection is just the one recognizing itself through different forms.
If this changed something in you, if you see relationships differently now, help me spread this message. Share it with someone who's struggling in their relationships, someone who feels alone, even surrounded by people. Because maybe they need to hear it's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person, the deep person, the clear person, the person who finally met themselves. If you're here at 3 in the morning, if you made it to the end of this transmission, there's a good chance you feel alone in your relationships, that you feel no one really sees you, that you're surrounded by people, but fundamentally alone. And I want to tell you something. This feeling isn't evidence that there's something wrong with you. It's not evidence that you're too complicated, too deep, too different. It's evidence that you've dived deeper than most, that you've met yourself in ways most haven't, and now you're looking for others who also dove. And they exist. Deep people exist. People who did the work exist. People who can see you, really see you, exist. But you won't find them trying to convince superficial people to be deep. You won't find them explaining who you are to people who don't have eyes to see. You'll find them by continuing to dive, continuing to go deeper, continuing to become so unequivocally yourself that you naturally resonate with others who did the same. And until you find them, until these deep souls cross your path, you have yourself. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all, that you don't need another to feel complete. You don't need external validation to know your worth. You don't need someone who sees you to know you exist. You always existed. You were always seen, not by human eyes, but by something greater, by the consciousness that animates you, by the life that flows through you, by the presence that you are. And when you touch that, when you really touch that, relationships stop being about filling voids. They become about sharing fullness, about celebrating the dance of two consciousnesses that don't need each other, but delight in being together. And that kind of relationship, that rare and precious kind of relationship, is only possible when you've done the work, when you've dove, when you've met yourself in the depths of your own solitude and emerged knowing I was always complete. So, next time you feel alone in a relationship, next time you feel no one sees you, don't blame the other. Don't blame yourself. Just ask, how far have I gone? How deeply have I met myself? Am I relating from fullness or from emptiness? And if the answer is emptiness, if you realize you're still seeking in the other what can only be found in you, then you know what to do. Stop, breathe, and come home. Come back to yourself. Dive into your own depths.
Meet yourself in the darkness of absolute solitude. And when you emerge, when you really emerge, you'll realize you weren't alone. You never were. And every relationship you have from that point will be different. Not because you found different people, but because you became different. You became deep. You became clear. You became someone who can see and be seen. And this is what transforms relationships. Not techniques, not strategies, not better communication or couples therapy. Just depth. Depth meeting depth. Presence recognizing presence. Consciousness delighting in its own reflection. You can only meet another as deeply as you've met yourself. So dive. Go deep. Meet yourself in the depths where no word reaches, no story defines, no mask hides. And then only then, you'll be ready for the real meeting. The meeting you've always sought. The meeting that was always possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for doing the work of going deeper, even when it's scary, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like you're the only one. You're not.